What if someone stole $32 million from a bank, and no one even realized what had happened? No gunshots, no alarms, no one dared to scream. But when people arrived at the bank the next morning, there were only empty vaults left behind. It was December 2004 in Belfast, Northern Ireland. Cold nights, glowing lights everywhere. Streets filled with the brightness of Christmas. People were busy shopping with their families, waiting for the coming holiday. But somewhere in that same city, a few people were not preparing for Christmas. They were preparing to make history. Their goal was clear. They were about to do something that would be talked about all over Europe for years to come. To the outside world, everything looked normal. But every move, every step those men took was part of a much bigger conspiracy. Northern Bank, a prestigious name in Belfast, a bank people trusted. A place where millions of dollars moved in and out every single day. Every employee there took pride in their job and honesty. No one could have ever imagined that the same bank would soon become the scene of one of the most mysterious robberies in the world. Evenings were getting colder. Children were buying toys in the markets. Carols echoed through the churches, and even the police were busy with holiday preparations. Everything seemed perfectly normal. But beneath that silence, something dangerous was brewing. Something no one could see. They say the most dangerous robbery is the one where no one gets hurt, but the vaults end up completely empty. And that was exactly what was about to happen. On the night of December 19th, while the city was asleep, some men sat wide awake, not with dreams but with a cold, sharp determination. They had months of planning, knowledge of every corner, and most importantly the desperation of two people working inside the bank. In the next few hours, something was going to happen that was neither from a gangster movie nor a thriller novel. It was a true story, so perfect that even 2 decades later, the police still don't have all the answers. This wasn't an ordinary robbery. No one was seen breaking into the vault. No car was seen speeding away on the streets. Yet the next morning, $32 million disappeared from the Northern Bank vault, as if it had never existed. This was the Northern Bank robbery, a story that redefined the meaning of crime and proved that the greatest weapon isn't a gun, it's the mind. Now the question wasn't how the robbery happened. The question was, who did it, why did it, and how did they vanish without a trace? The story begins on that cold night in Belfast, when someone swore to carry out the quietest yet most dangerous robbery in history. Belfast, the city that had heard both celebrations and gunfire throughout its past. It was the year 2004. The city was slowly recovering from what people called the Troubles. After 3 decades of conflict, peace was finally returning. But still, there was a thin layer of tension in the air. People smiled, but deep down, a little fear still lived within them. Fear that something could go wrong again. Northern Ireland and the United Kingdom still had political friction. The Irish Republican Army, the IRA, wanted Northern Ireland to separate from Britain and unite with Ireland. They were officially on a ceasefire, but everyone in the city knew such promises existed mostly on paper. The people of Belfast still lived cautiously, always watching their doorsteps. In the middle of this city stood the Northern Bank, a strong building surrounded by glass walls and equipped with the most advanced security systems. During the day it was always crowded. People came to deposit money, to withdraw cash for holidays. Just before Christmas, the bank was busier than ever. Bonus payments, salary transfers, holiday transactions, everything moved twice as fast. The bank's reputation wasn't just built on its systems or structure. It was built on the people who worked there. People who arrived on time every morning, greeted customers with a smile, and spent their entire day focused on work. One of them was Chris Ward. Chris was about 24, young, hard-working, and ambitious. He was a junior officer at the bank, admired for his honesty and dedication. His colleagues called him the reliable guy, because no matter how much work there was, Chris never made mistakes. He always came neatly dressed in a pressed suit and handled everything with professionalism. On the outside he looked like an ordinary man, but fate had written something extraordinary for him. The other was Kevin McMullen, a senior officer at the bank. Around 40 years old, married and a responsible family man, everyone saw him as the ideal employee, calm, composed, and completely trustworthy. Kevin's job was to supervise vault operations, the most secure section of the entire bank. He was like a mentor to his juniors and shared a good understanding with Chris. They often joked during tea breaks and discussed weekend plans together. In that December month, both had only one thing on their minds: just a few more days until Christmas holidays. Kevin had planned to take his wife Lorraine and their kids to the countryside. Chris was planning a short holiday trip with his friends. Everyone was happy. The entire bank was filled with a festive mood. Outside, streets were decorated with colorful lights, shops glowed, children wore Santa hats, and the sound of jingle bells echoed everywhere. The staff had also set up a small Christmas tree inside the office. Chris himself had hung a few ornaments on it. He didn't know it would be his last cheerful day. Northern Bank's security systems were among the most modern in the world. CCTV cameras covered every corner. Electronic vaults were locked with biometric access, and every transaction required double authorization. For ordinary thieves, even imagining a robbery here was impossible. But the real threat wasn't coming from outside, it was coming from within. In the evenings, when all employees left for home, a special section of the bank became active: the vault area. That's where the true treasure lay. Millions of pounds, neatly packed, numbered and sealed. Kevin was responsible for that section. He knew that if anything ever went wrong, he would be the first to be questioned. That's why he never took his duty lightly. Chris lived a simple life, a rented flat, a modest lifestyle, and not much of a social circle. He mostly focused on his work. Because of his loyalty and honesty, senior officers liked him a lot. He often worked late nights, trying to impress through his dedication. The people of Belfast were hoping for a new beginning, but in some corners of the city, old habits still lived. Black markets, secret syndicates, and underground political groups still operated quietly. Some said peace had come, but the truth was, only the method of war had changed. Now, instead of guns, mines and networks did the work. It was the last week before Christmas. Just a few more days, and then we'll take the kids to the countryside, Kevin told his wife. You always worry about work, she said, even during holidays. Not this time, he smiled. This time only family. Meanwhile, Chris sat in his flat, making travel plans. Brother, if the tickets get confirmed, we'll leave on the night of the 23rd, he said over the phone. After the call ended, he looked out the window. Snow was falling. People filled the streets below. He had no idea that within just a few days, his entire life was about to change. No one knew then that Chris and Kevin, two honest employees, would soon become the biggest headline in the country. Their names would appear on the front pages of newspapers, not as heroes, but as suspects. The world outside was still celebrating. But in the dark alleys of Belfast, shadows began to move. They watched the bank every day, studied the routines, gathered every piece of information needed for what was coming, the biggest game of all. And then came the night that stole Belfast's sleep. The night when no one died, but two lives changed forever. December 19, 2004. Belfast's winter was at its peak. Cold winds cut through the streets, and snowflakes sparkled in the air. Every home smelled like Christmas dinner. Someone was cooking, and somewhere someone was plotting. Someone was packing a gift. Someone was watching an old movie on TV. Chris Ward was doing something similar that night. Sitting on the sofa with a cup of tea in his hand, a Christmas special show was playing on TV. At around 9:30 p.m., there was a sudden knock on the door. At first he thought maybe a neighbor or a delivery person had come by mistake. He got up and went to the door, and as soon as he opened the bolt, two men stood in front of him, dressed all in black with their faces covered and a strange coldness in their eyes. Chris did not even have time to think. As soon as he opened the door, both of them came inside. One closed the door, the other dimmed the room lights. Suddenly the room was filled with silence. "Who are you people? What do you want? Do not make noise, Chris. We have only come to talk," came the voice. Not threatening, not angry, just an odd chill, as if every word had been premeditated. Chris's heart started beating fast. He looked around, but the two men standing before him had come fully prepared. Chris, terrified, did as he was told. "We need your help, and if you obey us, nothing will happen to you or your family," they said. "What do you want help with?" "I only work at the bank." "We know that, and that is exactly why we are here. We will stay here with your family. You will go to your duty tomorrow morning. You will do everything just as you do every day. If any mistake is made, if anything is told to the police, these people will not live. We do not want to hurt anyone. Just follow our instructions. You work at Northern Bank. We know you have access to the vault section. Tomorrow morning you will go to the office, and everything will be absolutely normal. If anyone even slightly suspects, think about what will happen to your family. We do not want your money. We only want your cooperation." He knew he had no way out. The night was very long. Chris and Kevin both sat in their homes, but their situation was the same. Neither could sleep, and both had only one fear in their hearts: their family. Chris sat in the corner of his room, staring out the window. A layer of snow had settled on the street. He wondered if everything would end tomorrow. Every minute felt like hours to him. He wanted this to be only a dream. But whenever he saw the masked man standing in his room, the reality would hit him. Kevin felt the same. He went and stood near his children's room. The door was closed, but soft sobs could be heard from inside. Soft sobbing. He rested his head against the wall, closed his eyes and told himself everything had to be all right by tomorrow morning. The night crawled on like an eternity. The clock's hands moved forward, yet time seemed frozen. At times a phone would ring in one of the houses. "All is well," came the voice, as if someone far away were controlling the whole event. When morning came, they were given clear instructions. "You both will go to your respective jobs. Keep everything normal. No one must suspect. And remember, our people are everywhere." Chris and Kevin stepped out of their homes with heavy feet. There was no coldness on their faces like the morning frost. Instead there was fear, guilt, and compulsion. Chris glanced at his door one last time, where his family was being held captive inside. He told himself he must do nothing, only get through the day. The streets of Belfast that morning were as quiet as ever. But two men's lives would never be quiet again. They had become prisoners in their own city, unhandcuffed, yet completely bound. The story was only a few hours from the robbery, an operation about to take place with no sound, but whose echo would be heard for many years. That night the cold winds of Belfast carried a silence like the calm before a storm. Chris Ward and Kevin McMullen both wore the same expression: fear and helplessness. The masked men who had entered their homes the previous night had clearly said, "Tomorrow you must do what we say, or your family will face a terrible end." So the next day when they arrived at Northern Bank, everything from the outside looked exactly as it always did. But inside them a war raged. Loyalty versus survival. Chris pretended to work at his usual desk, smiling and talking to people, while behind every word lay hidden fear. Kevin, the senior officer, tried to keep everything appearing normal. He knew someone outside was watching their every move. As evening approached, the bank's atmosphere began to change. With Christmas coming, several staff left early. But Chris and Kevin had to stay because they were told the audit needed closing. At exactly 6, when the bank officially closed and the last customer left, what happened next would be written in Northern Bank's history for decades to come. Kevin's steps trembled as he walked toward the basement vault. He knew people were already there. The same masked men who had taken his family hostage the night before. As he entered the ward section, the atmosphere shifted. 3 masked men were already standing there, efficient, focused, and militarily precise. They did not strike anyone. There was no shouting, no chaos. With cold calculation they said, "Open the vault quickly." With trembling hands, Kevin entered the access code and performed the biometric scan. The heavy door of the vault slowly opened to reveal neatly stacked bundles of cash. British pounds, euros, dollars, millions in different currencies. Now began the most crucial part of the operation. The robbers had organized everything methodically. One man removed bundles of notes, another filled them into large travel bags, and a third counted and recorded everything. Chris and Kevin were given constant instructions. Use this bundle. Adjust the camera angle. The bank's CCTV cameras were working that night, but the robbers knew which cameras to disable and which to leave pointing at blind spots so suspicion would not arise. They did not manually disable the security alarm. They manipulated the bank's internal schedule, so it would temporarily show a maintenance window. No amateur could have planned so meticulous. It was clear either an inside person had provided information, or this was the work of a highly trained organization. The operation lasted about 7 hours. Money was taken from the vault and packed into large duffel bags, in which about $32 million were placed. To move such a huge sum they used trolleys inside the bank, which were later taken out through the rear loading gate. A white van was already waiting there, and everything fit precisely inside it. During that time, Chris and Kevin remained inside. No one was hurt, no gun was fired, no glass was broken. Everything was carried out in absolute silence, like a surgical operation. At around 2:30 a.m., the robbers placed all the bags into the van, took one last look, and in a measured voice said, "Go home. Tell no one. You know what will happen to your family if even one word is spoken." And with that, they vanished into the darkness. Chris and Kevin stood there for a while, as if in a trance. They did not know what to tell the police, because if they spoke, their families' lives would be at risk. If they stayed silent, they would become suspects themselves. When Belfast's cold morning began, Northern Bank was no longer the place it had been the day before. Empty shelves inside the vault, scattered notes, and the fear in the eyes of two terrified employees were all that remained. And thus the largest cash robbery in UK history was carried out without a single shot, without violence, only with fear, planning, and absolute precision. But the story did not end there, for the real game was about to begin, raising questions. Was this an inside job, or the master plan of a large organization like the IRA? And the biggest question was, where had the 32 million? The next morning, December 20, 2004, the streets of Belfast were as busy as always. Christmas was about to arrive. Shops were bustling, and people were doing last-minute shopping. Northern Bank staff arrived as per routine. Everything seemed absolutely normal. Computers were turned on, counters opened, people smiled. But when a supervisor stepped toward the vault section, something felt strange. There was a faint smell outside the vault door, as if overnight activity had taken place. When they went inside and lifted the shutter, their eyes froze. The shelves that always held neatly bundled cash were empty. Only some scattered papers and a few fallen wrapping materials remained. The vault was completely empty. All the cash was gone from the vault. The manager and the head of security immediately rushed downstairs. Everything seemed intact. There was no damage, no signs of a break-in, but the money was nowhere to be found. The bank's internal logs were checked. Every access appeared authorized. That meant whoever did this had full permissions. All eyes turned toward two names, Chris Ward and Kevin McMullen, because only they had access to the vault. The police were called immediately. Within hours, the streets of Belfast were flooded with police vans and media reporters. Headlines flashed everywhere. UK's biggest bank robbery. $26.5 million vanished without a trace. Television channels began live coverage. People were in disbelief. How could so much money disappear without a single gunshot, without any alarms? Chris told the police everything. How masked men broke into his house at night, how they threatened him, and how, out of fear, he did everything they told him. Kevin repeated the same story. Were they really forced, or was this all planned in advance? Even the media began to ask questions. Was this an inside job? Was a terrorist organization involved? Meanwhile, their families, who had finally been released, were left psychologically shattered. Chris's mother kept saying, "He's not a bad boy. He did what he did out of fear." Kevin's wife would wake up at night, trembling in terror. "What if they come back?" she'd whisper. In Belfast, everyone was talking about the same thing. During Christmas week, when people usually talk about lights and gifts, every discussion was now about one question. How did such a huge robbery happen, and who did it? The Northern Bank building had now become a crime scene. Investigators were scanning every inch. Forensic experts analyzed fingerprints and camera footage. But everything was spotless. No trace, no fingerprints, no clear faces. Only one question echoed in the air. Who did this? And when the authorities found that every vault log entry was perfectly legitimate, they realized something chilling. Whoever planned this wasn't just brilliant. He knew the entire bank system from the inside. Northern Bank was no longer just an institution. It had become a mystery that had shaken the entire United Kingdom. And now, an investigation was about to begin that would turn into one of the century's most mysterious financial crime stories. In Belfast, the news of the Northern Bank robbery had become the top headline everywhere. $26.5 million gone into thin air. But the most shocking part was that the police had no solid leads. As the investigation began, every agency sped up its work. CCTV footage was examined for hours, but there wasn't a single frame showing any masked man. Only Chris and Kevin's routine movements were visible, and even they seemed normal. The bank's logs were checked again. Every entry was legitimate. Vault access, biometric scans, timings, everything matched perfectly with the system. No forced entry, no alarms. How could so much money disappear without anyone noticing? Within days, speculations began to rise. Investigators soon suspected that this couldn't have been the work of any local gang. The planning was too sophisticated. Every move was calculated. And then one name surfaced: the IRA, the Irish Republican Army. The IRA, a political and military organization in Northern Ireland that had been running underground operations against the UK for decades. They had intelligence, local connections, and military discipline, and the pattern of this robbery seemed eerily similar. No violence, perfect timing, and zero clues left behind. But this suspicion made everything even more complicated. Because now, this wasn't just a bank robbery. It had become a political issue. If the IRA was involved, it was a direct threat to the peace process. Accusing any organization without proof was dangerous. Diplomatic tensions began to rise between the two countries. Meanwhile, forensic experts were sent to every part of the bank, but no one found anything. Not a single fingerprint, no shoe print, no DNA trace. It was as if these people came in through the air, did everything, and vanished. The investigation began to stall, and then the media raised a new angle. Was this an inside job? Because vault access was only with two people: Chris Ward and Kevin McMullen. Kevin was senior and had a spotless record. But Chris was young, recently promoted and present during every crucial moment that night. Suspicion now turned toward him. The media made him the villain. Headlines screamed, "Was Chris Ward the inside man, employee and mastermind?" Chris's life turned upside down overnight. Reporters, news vans, flashing cameras gathered outside his house. Everyone had the same question: did you steal the money? His family lived between fear and shame. His mother stopped going to the market. His children were mocked at school. "I didn't do anything. I'm a victim too," Chris would say. But the system had already made him a suspect. The police called him in several times. Every time the same questions, the same doubt, sometimes calmly, sometimes under pressure. "Are you protecting someone?" they asked. Chris began to break down mentally. He couldn't sleep at night. He swung between guilt and fear. He said, "If I speak, my family will be in danger. But if I stay silent, the world will think I'm a thief." The tone of the narration now shifts. Sometimes the system itself turns an innocent man into a suspect. Sometimes the truth is so complex that it hides even among the evidence. For the police, this case was no longer just a robbery. It had become a psychological puzzle. Every theory led to a new story. Some saw the hand of the IRA. Some believed it was an insider's game. Others suspected an international laundering racket. But one thing was certain: whoever was behind this heist had not only robbed a bank, but had challenged both law and truth. The Northern Bank robbery was no longer just a crime. It had become a mystery that questioned the credibility of an entire nation. As the biggest robbery in Northern Bank's history came to light, not just the bank and police, but the politics of the UK and Ireland were shaken. This robbery had made the already fragile political environment between the two nations even more tense. From that morning in 2004, questions started rising. How could a fully secure bank be targeted so easily? CCTV footage, bank logs, and car trails gave no concrete clue. For intelligence agencies at the time, it was clear this was not the work of ordinary criminals. Too sophisticated to be normal criminals, they said. Soon suspicion fell on the Irish Republican Army. Their past activities and sophisticated operations made many believe that the Northern Bank heist could have been their creation. But the IRA immediately distanced itself from the allegations. Their spokesperson clearly said, "We have nothing to do with this." The tension between the UK and Irish governments reached its peak. Peace talks were affected. Some leaders believed the robbery wasn't just a crime, but a political message. The shadow of Northern Ireland's conflict seemed to fall over this case as well. Newspapers published daily stories of tension and accusations. In 2005, several main suspects were arrested. Police and intelligence agencies conducted joint operations and detained several people. But the legal system faced a challenge. There wasn't enough evidence against them. Eventually, the court released everyone. For investigators, it was a huge disappointment. Years of effort, yet they failed to catch the criminals. What happened to the stolen money was even more disturbing. Some portions were found in the black market, some were traced through illegal transactions across different countries. But most of the money remains missing to this day. Experts believe the funds ended up in international crime networks, making them nearly impossible to trace. For Northern Bank, it was both a financial and reputational disaster. The bank had to reprint all of its notes. Old notes were withdrawn from circulation. This move was so drastic that a cash shortage was felt across Northern Ireland. Economists and market experts called the situation unprecedented. This incident also raised serious questions about security protocols. Banks and institutions began to reanalyze their vault and cash transfer systems. It became clear that a high-profile heist was not just about money. It affected confidence, trust, and political stability. Ultimately, the Northern Bank heist remained an unresolved mystery. It wasn't just a robbery, it was a blend of political, financial, and social drama. Despite investigations, no direct link to the criminals was ever found. The stolen money remained scattered in the black market, and tension persisted between governments. Even today, historians and crime experts continue to analyze this robbery. It's not just the story of Northern Bank, but also a window into Northern Ireland's political landscape and the shadowy world of organizations like the IRA. The mystery of the Northern Bank heist still captivates minds. Even after years of investigations and intelligence reports, no solid mastermind has ever been identified. Experts and historians continue to debate, circulating three major theories. Let's understand them in detail. First, the IRA involvement theory. The most discussed theory suggests the IRA's hand in the heist. The reason behind this belief is that the IRA had a long history of sophisticated operations. Many believe this robbery could have been a way to raise funds for their political activity. Pros: historical precedent. The IRA had executed complex heists and attacks before. Sophistication. The planning and execution of this heist seemed far beyond the ability of ordinary criminals. Political context. At that time, Northern Ireland was under tension and needed funds for political movements. Cons: the IRA always denied the allegations. Intelligence agencies never found conclusive proof of their involvement. No suspect was ever convicted under this theory. This theory made headlines and fueled imagination, but no one was ever proven guilty in court. The second major theory, the insider job. Some experts believe that Northern Bank employees or managers secretly played a role in the theft. Vault access, security codes, and internal protocols were known only to insiders. Pros: access and timing. Reaching the vault and handling cash would have been impossible without inside help. Planning details. Sources say this heist couldn't have been planned without internal knowledge. Cons: no solid evidence ever surfaced against any employee. Without proof, the police never formally charged anyone. Even if insiders were involved, the mastermind remains unknown. This theory is compelling because many major heists in history have proven insider involvement, but in the Northern Bank case, no concrete proof was ever found. The third and most mysterious theory, professional mercenaries orchestrated by an unknown figure. According to this idea, the criminals were highly skilled professionals, hired externally for planning and logistics. Pros: professionalism. The heist was executed with such perfection that it appeared to be the work of external experts. No fingerprints, no major clues, no trail, all traits of a professional group. International connections. Some money laundering and black market trails pointed toward global hints. Cons: the unknown mastermind. Hiring high-cost professional mercenaries required huge funding, which wouldn't have been possible without insider knowledge. Lack of leads. Even if professionals were involved, no arrests were ever made. Money laundering and hidden reports. Some secret reports revealed that a large portion of the stolen money was laundered through property and business front. Bank records, shell companies, and offshore accounts were mentioned in intelligence reports. This means the crime network was so sophisticated that even though the money was traced, it was still lost somewhere. Experts believe the laundering process was so smooth that the stolen cash could never be legally traced. It got scattered in the black market and shadow networks. Today, no one knows the name of the Northern Bank heist mastermind. IRA involvement, insider job, or professional mercenaries. Each theory has its strengths and weaknesses. Investigations and intelligence reports offered hints, but no evidence strong enough to hold in court. This mystery turned the Northern Bank heist into not just a financial crime but also a challenge to politics, psychology, and criminal intelligence. Crime enthusiasts, historians, and security experts still narrate and analyze this story. This unsolved heist showed that crime is not just about money, it's a complex mix of planning, psychology, politics, and hidden networks. The stolen cash in the Northern Bank vaults, the notes in intelligence agencies' files, and the headlines in media reports together form a puzzle that no one has ever solved. The Northern Bank heist still raises questions in people's minds. Was it the IRA's plan, an insider's game, or did some unseen mastermind hire professional criminals and vanish? And that's what keeps people's curiosity alive. A decades-old mystery that remains unsolved. Even after so many years, the Northern Bank robbery is still a story that stuns every crime enthusiast and historian. It wasn't just a theft of money. It was a mix of planning, execution, and mystery that shook Northern Ireland and the entire banking world. Even after decades, the robbery still lives in people's imagination. Every clue, every theory, every secret report forms a puzzle no one has ever fully solved. Chris Ward, who was considered the main suspect for years, was later officially proven innocent. But even after justice, his life was never the same. Years of suspicion, media scrutiny, and public judgment permanently affected his private life and career. Ward's story reveals the human cost of this robbery. That crime isn't just about money, it deeply affects human lives. The money stolen from Northern Bank, a large portion remains missing. Some was traced in black markets and illegal channels, but most of it is still gone. That missing money is what makes this robbery even more mysterious. Despite years of investigation and intelligence efforts, the missing money remains an unanswered question. The narrator softly raises a final question. Was this the world's most perfect robbery, or a failure of the system? This question applies not only to the Northern Bank heist but to every great unsolved crime. The story of sophistication and planning forces us to think. Crime is never just the work of criminals. Sometimes it happens because of flawed systems and loopholes. To keep the suspense and curiosity alive in the audience's mind, the narrator's words remain reflective and mysterious. Some mysteries are never fully solved. The Northern Bank robbery is one of them, a decades-old enigma that still leaves questions in every listener's mind. For more true but mysterious stories like this, stay tuned to Chronicles of Crime, because every crime has a story. The Northern Bank robbery didn't just leave behind records, it left behind lessons, questions, and a complex network of mysteries that people still analyze, speculate, and discuss today. Every crime has a story, and sometimes only the story remains, a mystery greater than the crime itself.